Back in the swinging 60s and 70s, there was one name that turned heads everywhere you looked. Raquel Welch. She was one of the biggest Hollywood sex symbols the world has ever seen. But why did so many people in Hollywood say she had such a bad reputation? You'll want to watch this one all the way to the end. In just a short time, she pushed aside the soft, blonde, bombshell look that had ruled the 1950s, the Marilyn Monroes and Jane Mansfields of the world, and brought in a brand new, bolder kind of sexy. It was powerful, confident, and had a sharp edge that hit moviegoers, fans, and studio bosses like a thunderbolt. Everybody wanted a piece of her. What really set the world on fire was her role as Lawana the Fair One in 1,000,000 Years BC. That single image of Raquel standing tall in a desolate prehistoric landscape, wearing nothing but that tiny doe-skin bikini, became one of the most famous photographs in pop culture history. It was plastered on posters, bedroom walls, and magazine covers everywhere. Almost overnight, she became one of the most popular and desired women of the entire decade. That one picture followed her for the rest of her career, whether she liked it or not. But here's the interesting part that a lot of people don't know. That same legendary physique that made her a superstar actually became something of an obstacle for her. Over the years, Raquel made it very clear in interviews that she never really bought into the whole sex symbol label, even though she was the one putting it out there for the cameras. She once said something that always stuck with me. Being a sex symbol is rather like being a convict. You're locked in this image and you can't get out. She came from a very conservative family with a traditional upbringing. Her mother was strict and old-fashioned, and Raquel always insisted she was not raised to be a sex symbol. It simply wasn't in her nature. To her, the sexy image was just part of the job, a character she played on screen. It was only one side of her, never the whole woman. She wanted people to see beyond the bikini and recognize her as a serious actress. But that proved to be much harder than she expected. Even with all that exposure and fame, Raquel never managed to build a long, steady, big-screen career like some of the other major stars. She first broke into movies in 1964 with small bit parts in A House Is Not a Home and Elvis Presley's Roustabout. The very next year, she had a brief appearance in the beach movie A Swingin' Summer. To help pay the bills in those early days, she did a lot of modeling work. In 1964, she even became the billboard girl for the TV show Hollywood Palace. Over the years, she appeared in dozens of films and landed a contract with 20th Century Fox. She got a solid co-starring role in the hit sci-fi movie Fantastic Voyage. But it was the British-made prehistoric adventure 1,000,000 Years BC that really made her a household name. The studio promoted it heavily with that now legendary poster of her in the fur bikini, and it worked like magic. Still, even though Raquel clearly had real screen presence and a good sense of humor, too many people in the audience, and even at the studios, seemed more interested in her tight costumes and bikini scenes than in her actual acting ability. That frustration would follow her for a long time. Later on in the 1980s, she tried something different. She launched a cabaret act and took it all the way to Broadway, where she won the lead role in the hit musical Woman of the Year. She always said one of the projects she was most proud of was the television movie The Legend of Walks Far Woman, in which she played a Native American woman at different stages of her life. It was filmed back in 1979, but didn't actually air until 1982. After that, she continued working in television films, including Right to Die in 1987 and the 1988 drama Scandal in a Small Town. And even later in life, she kept making good use of her famous figure by releasing a very successful series of exercise videotapes and fitness books that sold extremely well. Raquel Welch was born Jo Raquel Tejada on September 5, 1940, in Chicago, Illinois. Her father, Armando Tejada Urquizo, was a Bolivian aeronautical engineer, while her mother, Josephine Serra, was Irish-American. The mix of those two very different backgrounds would shape Raquel in ways she would feel for the rest of her life. She once recalled, "My mother came from a very well-educated family. She was very straight-laced and proper. On the other hand, her father brought a strong Latin influence into the home, passionate, temperamental, and highly emotional. That combination created quite a fiery household. In 1942, when Raquel was just a toddler, her father was transferred from Consolidated Aircraft to General Dynamics in San Diego. The family moved into a modest little stucco house in La Jolla, only 2 blocks from the beach. It sounded like a nice, sunny California childhood on the surface. Within 2 years, Raquel had a baby brother named James and a little sister named Gail. But the marriage between her parents didn't last. They eventually divorced, and Raquel would later remember her childhood home as being full of tension, largely because of her father's volatile and unpredictable temper. Back when she was a little girl in Chicago, her classmates couldn't pronounce her full name properly, so they simply called her Rocky. That nickname stuck with her for quite a while. As she grew up, she studied both ballet and drama seriously. She even won several beauty titles early on, including Miss Photogenic and Miss Contour. While still in school in San Diego, she was crowned Miss Fairest of the Fair at the San Diego County Fair. At first, Raquel dreamed of becoming a professional ballerina. She worked extremely hard at it, but around the age of 17, her instructor gently broke the news to her. She had grown quite a bit by then, and her body simply didn't have the ideal proportions for classical ballet. That was a tough pill for her to swallow after so many years of dedication. Even so, Raquel was a determined young woman. She became a star cheerleader in high school and was also a straight-A student who served as vice president of her senior class. She kept up her dance lessons all through high school and took part in many of the school's drama club productions. While most of the other kids her age were spending their free time at the beach, hanging out with friends, and enjoying the California sun, Raquel was already laser-focused on her future. She knew she wanted a career in show business, and she was willing to work harder than everyone else to make it happen. After finishing high school, Raquel married her high school sweetheart, James Welch, in 1959. Just a year later, the young couple welcomed their first child, a son named Damon. At that point, she was still very much chasing her show business dreams while trying to balance marriage and motherhood. She kept pushing forward with her aspirations and soon landed a job as the weather girl at a local San Diego television station. It seemed like a small step into the entertainment world, but it was something. However, the heavy demands of her college studies, family responsibilities, and this new television job quickly became too much to handle. Eventually, Welch made the difficult decision to drop out of college. By December 1961, when she gave birth to her daughter Tawny, her marriage was already starting to crumble. The relationship fell apart not long afterward, and the couple divorced in 1964. After the split, Raquel chose to keep her husband's last name, Welch, partly to make her name sound less obviously Latin. She wanted to downplay her Hispanic heritage at a time when that might have limited her opportunities in Hollywood. Now a single mother with 2 young children in tow, she moved to Dallas, Texas. There she worked as a model for Neiman Marcus during the day and took shifts as a cocktail waitress at night just to keep the family going. Deep down, she still dreamed of a stage career in New York and was slowly working her way eastward, one step at a time. But money was extremely tight. With only about $200 to her name, Raquel realized she simply couldn't afford the long cross-country trip to New York with 2 small children. So she made the practical choice and brought the kids back to California. She settled in Hollywood and began the tough, daily grind of making the rounds. She traveled from studio to studio and talent agency to talent agency, often by bus or on foot, carrying her portfolio and hoping for any opportunity. Eventually, she started landing small bit parts. One of them was in the 1964 Elvis Presley musical, Roustabout. Even in those early days, Welch was determined not to be stuck forever as just eye candy or background decoration. She wanted real acting chances. Then came a lucky break, a chance meeting in a little cafe on Sunset Boulevard with a young Hollywood publicist named Patrick Curtis. That meeting would change the direction of her career. Curtis saw something special in her and offered to manage her professionally. He helped her land a modest but noticeable role in the 1965 teenage beach movie A Swingin' Summer. One film critic at the time wrote a line that perfectly captured the moment. "It's hard to look away when she's in view." Raquel's voluptuous beauty and striking presence were quickly causing a real sensation around Hollywood. It wasn't long before she was invited to screen test at 20th Century Fox for the James Coburn spy film Our Man Flint. For reasons that were never fully explained, some studio executives tried to pressure her into changing her name to something simpler, like Debbie. Thankfully, Raquel stood her ground and kept the name Raquel Welch. Not long after that, big news came down the line. Albert Cubby Broccoli, the famous producer of the James Bond series, wanted her as his next Bond girl. When Richard Zanuck, the head of 20th Century Fox, heard about the 007 interest, he moved fast and signed Welch to an exclusive contract with the studio right away. Her first real featured role at Fox turned out to be surprisingly small, almost microscopic, you might say. The studio cast her in the 1966 science fiction classic Fantastic Voyage, where she played a supporting part in a story about a submarine crew shrunk down to explore the inside of a human body. By the time Fantastic Voyage was hitting theaters and making money, Raquel was already across the ocean in England. She had been loaned out to the British horror studio Hammer Films for what would become the movie that completely changed her life. 1,000,000 years BC. That 1966 prehistoric adventure was a remake of an old 1940s Stone Age fantasy, but it was Raquel's performance, or more accurately, her image, that made it unforgettable. The studio created a now legendary poster of her standing in a rugged, desolate landscape, wearing nothing but a tiny, revealing, doe-skinned bikini. That single photograph turned her into an instant pin-up sensation and established her as a unique kind of sex symbol, a striking, dark-haired bombshell who looked nothing like the blonde glamour girls of the previous decade. At only 5 feet 6 inches, Raquel suddenly became an international sex symbol almost overnight. Her face and figure were everywhere, and men all over the world couldn't stop talking about her. But she quickly discovered that being labeled a sex symbol came with heavy baggage, and it wasn't at all what she had imagined or hoped for. The studios and the public seemed to want only one thing from her, that glamorous, sexy image. They had very little interest in hearing her ideas, her ambitions, or her thoughts about acting. She had so many dreams and creative ideas bubbling inside her, yet nobody seemed willing to listen. Raquel was always quick to push back when people suggested that Hollywood had simply forced this image on her with no choice. In 1967, she packed up her children and moved to Europe together with Patrick Curtis. While living there, she took on various film roles across the continent, hoping to stretch herself as an actress and gain more control over her career. When she eventually returned to the United States, 20th Century Fox wasted no time pairing her with some of Hollywood's biggest leading men. She appeared opposite James Stewart and Dean Martin in the violent western Bandolero, and she worked with Frank Sinatra in the hard-boiled detective story Lady in Cement. In 1969, she took on a bold role alongside former football star turned actor Jim Brown in the controversial western 100 Rifles. The film made headlines because it featured one of the first interracial love scenes in a major Hollywood motion picture. Then came 1970, and with it, one of the riskiest decisions of her career. Raquel chose to play a transsexual character determined to conquer Hollywood in the film Myra Breckinridge. Many people thought it was a daring artistic move, but the movie turned out to be both a critical and box office disaster. Eager to try something new and take more control, Raquel and her then-husband decided to produce her next picture themselves, a film called Hanny Calder. Unfortunately, the audience reaction was lukewarm at best, and it didn't perform nearly as well as they had hoped. Beyond her famous, sexy physique, Raquel also earned a rather notorious reputation in Hollywood as one of the most difficult actresses to work with. Stories about her temperamental behavior, unprofessional attitude, and occasional lack of respect for others on set became legendary. These tales followed her for much of her career. She was often labeled as one of show business's biggest and most uptight actress, and there was never any shortage of gossip and behind-the-scenes stories to back up that image. Of course, we were curious about how she earned such a strong reputation. It didn't take long to come across some of the most famous incidents, many of them centered around the troubled production of Myra Breckinridge. But let's be fair here. There are always two sides to every story. And in Hollywood, sometimes even more than two. In 1985, Barbara Walters interviewed Raquel. She finally spoke out. "You can't please everybody all the time. I think there are quite a number of people I do please, and I'm very much a perfectionist and quite demanding, but I'm worth it." It's quite easy to consider that she was unfairly labeled difficult for being so outspoken, resisting to go along with how others wanted to pigeonhole her as the sexy bombshell, and simply wanting to be in more control of her image and the direction of her career. In 1981, Raquel Welch was an unlikely heroine in the fight for actors' rights. A few weeks into shooting MGM's Cannery Row, the actress, then 40, abruptly was fired from her lead role opposite Nick Nolte in the film based on the John Steinbeck novel. The studio claimed Welch's insistence on doing her hair and makeup at home rather than on set was a violation of her $250,000 pay-or-play contract. She immediately was replaced by Deborah Winger, then 25, as the movie's hooker with a heart of gold. At first, Welch said she'd go along with the change if she were offered another film role, but the studio, then run by David Begelman, declined. Then all hell broke loose. Welch filed a $24 million breach of contract suit. When the suit went to trial, Welch had a high-powered attorney in Edward Mosk. In his closing arguments, Mosk said the case was an example of arrogant corporate executives acting without regard for human beings. MGM's lawyer said the studio fired Welch because she was a temperamental actress who, if she could not have her own way, refused to talk to the producer and director. The jury sided with Welch, who reacted to the verdict by raising both fists in the air. 7 years later, an appeals court upheld the ruling in the bad faith discharge case and awarded her $10 million, $20 million today, $8 million of which was for punitive damages. Welch not only looked fabulous, but has managed to avoid the disastrous fate that befalls many Hollywood bombshells by reinventing herself as a business mogul. She made a popular line of signature wigs. Raquel Welch passed away on February 15, 2023, at the age of 82. Even in her later years, she remained a striking and independent woman who lived life on her own terms. Her legacy is that of a true trailblazer, a beautiful, fiery, and strong-willed woman who refused to be defined by just one image. She changed the idea of sex appeal in Hollywood and proved that a star could have both glamour and a fighting spirit. As an actress and pop culture icon, she starred in 50 movies, winning a Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Musical or Comedy for her role in the 1973 film The Three Musketeers, as well as receiving a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Now it is your turn. What do you think about the life and legacy of Raquel Welch?